"Share me with your friends," the homeless giant bride whispered. But the lonely rancher said, Elias stood at the edge of his Martian ranch, his eyes scanning the endless red dunes that stretched toward the horizon. The sun, low and pale in the sky, cast long shadows that made the desert look like a painting. His small drones hummed quietly as they moved among the scattered patches of synthetic crops he had painstakingly grown. It was another quiet evening, the kind where the wind whispered secrets only he seemed to hear. The ranch was his world, and yet he sometimes felt it was too small, too empty. He adjusted the straps of his worn utility vest and checked the water levels for the hydroponic plants. They were thriving, slowly but steadily, thanks to the careful balance he had learned over years of trial and error. Still, he felt a peculiar emptiness that not even the growing greenery could fill. Life on Mars was lonely. The nearest settlement was a day's travel away, and even then the people there were always busy, always moving. Here, he had the land to himself, the sky above, and the faint hum of his machines. But humans were not meant to be alone, and he knew it. As Elias worked, a movement on the horizon caught his eye. At first he thought it was a trick of the light, the sun reflecting off the distant dunes. But the silhouette grew larger, moving with a slow, deliberate pace. His heart skipped a beat. Mars was mostly empty, with only the occasional rover or wandering trader appearing on these plains. This was something else, something enormous. He squinted, shielding his eyes from the glare. The figure was taller than any human could be, taller than the communication towers he had built to connect with the outside world. Even from this distance, he could see the ragged edges of what looked like a dress fluttering in the wind. It was as if someone or something had stepped out of an old storybook and into his life. Elias took a cautious step back toward the small shelter where he stored his equipment. He wasn't sure what he should do. The giant could be dangerous. He could be imagining things. Maybe it was just a mirage caused by the heat of the setting sun. Yet the more he watched, the more he realized it was real. The giant paused, as if noticing him for the first time. Then, in a voice that carried like a soft echo across the dunes, the figure whispered words that made him freeze. "Share me with your friends?" Elias blinked. The words seemed to float in the air. They were gentle, almost sad, but also carried a strange warmth. He opened his mouth to answer, but nothing came. After a moment, he found his voice. I don't even know who you are," he said cautiously. The giant tilted her head slightly, her long hair shimmering like threads of silver under the fading sunlight. She stepped closer, each movement careful and graceful despite her size. She didn't speak again immediately, only watched him with eyes that seemed to hold centuries of memories. Elias felt a shiver, not from fear but from awe. He had heard stories of beings from distant worlds, of ancient creatures wandering the desert plains, but he had never imagined seeing one himself. "I am called Lyra," she said at last, her voice gentle like a soft melody. "I have nowhere to go. I have traveled far and I am tired. I thought perhaps you could share me with your friends." Elias frowned. I don't have many friends. Most people are far away," and he trailed off, realizing how lonely he truly was. He felt a strange connection to this enormous stranger. She was alone and so was he. It was an odd, impossible situation, and yet it felt natural. Lyra's eyes softened. "Then perhaps you and I can be friends just for tonight." Elias swallowed hard and nodded. "All right, just for tonight." He motioned toward the small shelter. "You can rest there. It's not much, but it's safe." Lyra lowered herself carefully, bending her long legs and folding her enormous body in ways that seemed almost impossible for someone so large. The ground trembled lightly with her movements, but she managed without breaking anything. When she finally settled near the shelter, Elias felt a mix of relief and curiosity. "Do you eat?" he asked, unsure of what a giant from somewhere unknown might require. Lyra smiled faintly. "I do not need much. Food is simple, water even simpler. I mostly travel, I remember." Elias nodded. There was something about her words, the way she spoke, that suggested she carried a lifetime of experiences. "Well, we can share some water. I keep it clean here." He fetched a large container and, using a special drone to lift it toward her, offered it to her. She sipped slowly, and the air seemed to shimmer around her, almost like the desert itself recognized her presence. They sat together in silence as the stars began to appear, twinkling faintly through the thin Martian atmosphere. The silence was comfortable, not awkward. Elias felt like he had known Lyra forever, even though she had appeared only moments ago. "Why are you here?" he asked finally. "Why travel so far and come to a lonely rancher like me?" Lyra's gaze drifted toward the horizon. "I do not belong anywhere. My world is gone, and the people I knew, they are memories now. I wander, hoping to find kindness. I find it rarely." "You are kind." Elias felt a lump in his throat. "I'm not sure I know how to be kind. I mostly just survive here." She tilted her head. "Kindness is survival too, in a way. You survive, and in doing so, you allow others, like me, to find safety." For a long time, they spoke about nothing and everything. Elias told her about the ranch, the crops, the drones, and the quiet days that stretched endlessly. Lyra told him stories of her home world, of cities that floated above oceans, of forests taller than the clouds, and of creatures who could sing in colors instead of sounds. Elias listened, fascinated. He had never imagined such things existed. "You make it sound beautiful," he said finally. "I never knew anything like that was possible." Lyra's eyes shone. "It is possible if one dares to see beyond the deserts, beyond the dust." Night deepened and the temperature dropped. Elias retrieved a thin thermal blanket from his shelter and draped it across the enormous figure. She seemed to smile, though it was hard to tell on such a grand scale. "Thank you," she whispered, almost to herself. Elias sat back and looked up at the stars. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of wonder. Here was a being unlike any he had known, a traveler who carried the weight of worlds on her shoulders, and yet she chose to rest near him. And somehow he felt that this encounter, as improbable as it was, had changed something inside him. "Do you ever get lonely?" he asked quietly. Lyra tilted her head, her silver hair glinting in the starlight. "Always, but sometimes loneliness can bring something unexpected." "Like tonight?" Elias nodded. "I think I understand." The wind swept across the dunes, carrying the faint scent of Martian minerals and the soft echo of Lyra's words. They sat together until sleep took them in different ways. Elias rested in his small shelter, listening to the gentle hum of the desert and the occasional soft movement of Lyra nearby. He dreamed of floating cities and singing forests, of giants wandering deserts and humans daring to imagine them. When morning came, the light painted the dunes in shades of gold and pink. Lyra stirred, rising carefully to her full height. Elias watched, amazed at how her presence transformed the landscape. She was enormous, yet she moved with grace, as if she belonged to the world in ways humans could only dream of. "Will you stay for a while?" Elias asked hesitantly, hoping she would say yes. Lyra looked at him, her eyes reflecting the sunrise. "I cannot stay forever. I must wander, but I will remember this place and you." Elias smiled, though a pang of sadness touched him. "I will remember you too." As Lyra stepped back into the dunes, her figure slowly disappearing into the horizon, Elias felt a strange hope stirring inside him. She had come from nowhere, shared her stories, and in doing so, had reminded him that the universe was bigger than his lonely ranch, bigger than the red sands, bigger even than the stars. And perhaps, he thought, if kindness could reach even a wandering giant from a lost world, there was no telling what could happen next. Elias returned to his work, but the emptiness he had felt before was gone, replaced by curiosity and wonder. Somewhere out there, Lyra wandered, carrying memories and stories, and he could only hope that one day, paths would cross again. For now, he smiled, and the Martian sun warmed the desert, bright and endless, as if the world itself had opened its arms. The next morning, Elias woke to the faint hum of his drones and the soft pink light spilling over the Martian dunes. The previous night's encounter with Lyra had left his mind buzzing. He replayed every word she had spoken, every detail of her silver hair and the way she moved across the sand. The memory was like a song that refused to fade, a story that demanded attention. He stepped outside, scanning the horizon for any sign of her. The dunes were empty. The sun reflected off the red sand in waves, and the air smelled faintly of iron and stone. Lyra had left, but she had left a presence behind, like a gentle imprint on the landscape. Elias shook his head, smiling. "A giant, really," he muttered. "A wandering giant, and I met her." The words sounded strange even to him, but he could not deny the truth of them. He returned to his work, tending to the crops and checking the water filtration systems. The plants had grown a little overnight, but it was hard to tell if the subtle changes were real or if he was simply imagining them. His curiosity, though, was stronger than ever. He wanted to know more about Lyra, about the world she had seen, about the knowledge she carried. Even if she was gone, he felt the need to prepare for her return. By midday, he noticed a small glimmer at the far edge of his property. At first, he thought it was sunlight reflecting off a crystal, but then the glimmer moved. His heart skipped a beat. Could she have returned? He grabbed his binoculars and adjusted them carefully. There she was, Lyra, standing at the edge of the dunes, as tall and majestic as ever. She seemed to hesitate, as if unsure whether to come closer. Elias waved, and her head turned toward him. A small smile spread across her face, faint but unmistakable. He ran toward her, careful to avoid the fragile plants he had nurtured. "Lyra, you came back," he called, trying to keep his voice steady despite the excitement. She moved closer, her footsteps gentle despite her size. The ground trembled lightly under her weight, but the vibration was strangely comforting, a reminder that she was real and not some illusion. "I thought I might visit," Lyra said softly, her voice floating across the air like a melody. "You have done well here." The plants, they are alive with care. Elias felt a surge of pride. His lonely ranch, which had once seemed so small and isolated, now held the attention of a being who had walked among worlds. Lyra crouched slightly to observe the crops. Her eyes, reflecting the Martian sun, seemed to study every detail. "You are careful," she murmured, "not just with the land, but with life itself." Elias nodded, feeling a warmth spread through him. It was the first time anyone had recognized the thought he put into his small corner of Mars. Over the next few hours, Lyra taught him something unexpected. She explained how the soil on Mars was alive in ways humans did not often notice. Tiny organisms existed beneath the surface, waiting for warmth, water, and care. Elias listened, fascinated, as she described the delicate balance of energy, light, and growth. Using simple tools, she showed him how to enhance the plant's connection to the soil, how to adjust the water flow to reach the deepest roots, and how to use mirrors to reflect sunlight more evenly across the crops. "This will make them stronger," Lyra said. "Not just bigger, but more alive. They will thrive because you care, because you watch, and because you understand." Elias worked alongside her, feeling like a student again for the first time in years. The bond between them grew naturally, a mix of respect, curiosity, and something deeper that neither had words for yet. By the afternoon, Elias had an idea. If Lyra could teach him to enhance the crops, perhaps the same knowledge could benefit others in the Martian community. He described a plan to her, speaking quickly as ideas flowed. "We could make a network of greenhouses, small farms that share water and energy. You could help, but safely. People could learn from your knowledge without overwhelming you." Lyra tilted her head, considering. "It is possible," she said at last. "But humans are cautious. They might fear me." Elias nodded. He had expected this. "I can help them understand. We don't have to be afraid. You are gentle and your knowledge is a gift. That is what they will see." Together, they began working on the first prototype. Elias rigged floating platforms and drones that could carry small tools and devices to Lyra without her needing to step on delicate soil. Holographic screens displayed data about plant growth and environmental conditions, allowing her to guide him and anyone else who wanted to learn. The technology was simple by her standards, but it worked. Slowly, the barren landscape around the ranch began to hum with new life. That evening, a few distant neighbors arrived, drawn by the unusual sight of the giant on the ranch. At first, they were hesitant, whispering among themselves and keeping their distance. Lyra stayed still, allowing them to observe without feeling threatened. Elias stepped forward to introduce her, explaining her gentle nature and the ways she could help improve the land. The neighbors watched in awe as Lyra demonstrated the use of mirrors to reflect sunlight, adjusted irrigation systems with precision, and even shared ideas for planting patterns that would maximize growth. Children laughed and pointed, fascinated by her size and grace, while adults nodded thoughtfully, absorbing her guidance. Elias felt a sense of pride he had never experienced before. This was no longer just his lonely ranch. It had become a place of learning, wonder, and collaboration. As night fell, the community gathered near a small fire Elias had built for warmth. Lyra sat quietly, towering above the group but calm and approachable. She spoke of her world again, painting pictures with words of forests taller than skyscrapers, skies filled with floating cities, and creatures that communicated in light. The humans listened, captivated, and for a moment, the loneliness that had haunted Elias and Lyra seemed to vanish. Elias realized something important. Lyra had arrived at his ranch not just to share her knowledge, but to remind humans that connection, curiosity, and care could transform even the harshest environments. Her presence had ignited a spark in the community. People who had once lived in isolation, each tending their small plots of land, now shared ideas, tools, and laughter. The ranch had become a hub of creativity and collaboration. Lyra smiled, noticing Elias watching the reactions of his neighbors. "You have done well," she said softly. "Not just with the plants, but with them, you have helped them see possibilities." Elias felt a warmth he could not describe. He had always wanted to belong, to make a difference, and now, guided by a stranger from another world, he was doing just that. As the firelight flickered and the stars rose overhead, Elias and Lyra worked quietly side by side, planning the next steps. They discussed ways to expand the gardens, how to introduce new plants that could thrive in the Martian soil, and ways to involve more people safely. Lyra's guidance was invaluable, and yet she encouraged independence, teaching rather than doing everything for them. Elias understood this. True help, true connection came from learning and growing together. The night deepened, and a gentle silence settled over the ranch. Elias looked at Lyra and asked a question he had been holding in his heart. "Do you feel happy here?" Lyra tilted her head, considering. "I feel welcomed. I feel understood. That is rare for someone like me. Happiness is not simple, but it is possible, even in small moments like this." Elias nodded, feeling the truth in her words. For the first time, he realized that happiness could be shared, not just sought individually. They stayed near the fire until the early hours, speaking softly, laughing at small jokes, and sharing stories that ranged from the mundane to the fantastical. Elias learned about Lyra's past adventures, the strange planets she had seen, the cultures that had come and gone. He told her about his childhood, growing up on Earth before his family had chosen to settle on Mars, about the loneliness that had shaped him and the dreams he had almost given up on. When dawn approached, Lyra stood and stretched, her towering form catching the first rays of the sun. Elias watched in awe as the light reflected off her silver hair, making it glow like liquid metal. "I must continue my journey soon," she said softly, "but I will return. I want to see how far you all can go." Elias smiled, though a pang of sadness touched him. "I'll be here, the ranch, the plants, and everyone. We will be ready." Lyra nodded. "Good. You are ready in ways you do not yet know." With a gentle step, she began moving toward the horizon, her figure gradually fading into the light. Elias watched until she disappeared completely, leaving behind a sense of wonder and hope that lingered in the air. The community gathered around Elias as he returned from watching Lyra depart. They spoke excitedly about the ideas she had shared, the techniques she had taught, and the vision she had inspired. For the first time, they felt like a team, connected not just by proximity, but by a shared sense of possibility. Elias smiled, feeling the loneliness that had haunted him slowly dissolve. The ranch had become something more than a home. It was a place of learning, imagination, and connection. Elias knew that the journey ahead would not be easy. The Martian environment was harsh, and the challenges of growing life and building community were significant. But he also knew that they were no longer alone. They had Lyra's guidance, each other's support, and the spark of curiosity and kindness that had transformed his lonely ranch into a hub of possibility. As he prepared the drones for another day of work, Elias felt a renewed sense of purpose. The desert no longer seemed empty. It was full of potential, full of life waiting to be nurtured. Somewhere out there, Lyra wandered, carrying her stories and knowledge, but she had left a piece of herself with them. And they would honor it by learning, growing, and sharing what they had discovered. For Elias, the ranch, and the community, the adventure had only just begun. And though the giant might not always be visible, her presence had changed everything. The Martian desert, once a place of isolation and silence, was now alive with possibility, laughter, and the gentle hum of life being shared. Days passed, and Elias could feel the change spreading across his little ranch. The once lonely Martian land was now buzzing with life, not just the plants, but people. Neighbors from distant settlements had started visiting more often, drawn by the stories of the gentle giant who had transformed a simple ranch into a place of wonder. Children ran across the sandy fields, carefully avoiding the fragile crops, while adults experimented with the methods Lyra had taught. Each visit carried a sense of curiosity and excitement that Elias had never known before. Lyra had returned as well, carefully managing her movements so she wouldn't harm the fields. Her presence was quiet but commanding, like a lighthouse shining across the dunes. She spoke softly, guiding Elias and the visitors as they adjusted water channels, mirrors, and soil enrichment tools. With every gesture, she taught them not only about plants, but about patience, observation, and respect for the world around them. Life is more than what you see, she explained one morning, crouched beside a row of young Martian greens. The soil, the water, even the sunlight, all are connected. The plants know even when humans do not. They respond to care, and care is a language. Elias listened, fascinated. He had understood planting before, but her words made him see it differently. It was not just about survival. It was about communication, attention, and understanding. He began to notice subtle patterns he had ignored before. The way leaves tilted towards sunlight differently depending on the time of day. The way water seemed to move in small currents beneath the soil. Curious neighbors gathered around, eager to learn. One elderly man, his face lined with the years of hardship on Mars, asked, "Can we really make the soil live like that?" Lyra smiled. "Yes, you do not need magic, only patience and thoughtfulness. Everything has a way to respond if you give it time." The community worked together under her guidance. They moved slowly at first, afraid of damaging the fragile ecosystems they were trying to nurture. But Lyra's presence was calming, and her gentle corrections encouraged them. "Do not rush," she reminded them. "Hurry destroys understanding." Elias realized that something had shifted in the people around him. The same neighbors who had once kept their distance, suspicious and cautious, were now talking to each other, sharing ideas and collaborating. The ranch had become a hub of learning, but more importantly, it had become a place of trust. People were discovering not only new methods for growing food, but also the value of working together. Lyra introduced a new idea one morning. "We can go further," she said, her eyes bright. "Plants are not the only living things here. Water, air, even small rocks contain energy. You can connect them and life will thrive." Elias frowned slightly. "Energy in rocks?" he asked, unsure of what she meant. Lyra knelt beside a small patch of soil and held her hand over it. The air shimmered faintly, almost like heat rising from the sand. "Rocks and minerals have patterns. Water carries memory. If you pay attention, you can guide them. You will not see it all at once, but life will respond." He tried, following her instructions. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then slowly he noticed subtle changes. The soil became darker, richer, more uniform. Water flowed differently, feeding roots more evenly. Even the tiniest sprouts seemed to straighten, reaching eagerly toward the light. His heart raced. His land, was alive in a way he had never imagined. Lyra watched him carefully. "You are learning," she said softly. "Not just about plants, but about listening. This is what humans can do. You can pay attention and care, and the world will answer." As days turned into weeks, more visitors arrived. Some came to learn, some to help, and some simply to see the giant. Elias managed the flow carefully, ensuring that Lyra could interact safely. He built platforms and support systems that allowed her to move around without damaging the crops. Holographic displays showed real-time growth patterns, allowing her to give instructions even from a distance. Children were fascinated. They followed her every movement, mimicking her gestures and learning how to interact with the environment. One small girl, no more than 7, asked, "Why are you so big?" Lyra smiled. "Being big allows me to see more, to reach farther, but size is not always strength. Strength is patience, kindness, and understanding." The girl's eyes widened. "I want to be strong like that." Lyra nodded. "Then start by noticing what is around you. Care for it, and you will grow strong in ways you cannot see." Elias watched the interactions with quiet pride. His once-isolated ranch had become a place of teaching and discovery, and he realized that Lyra had taught them more than plant growth. She had taught them to look, to listen, and to value the small things. The Martian desert, harsh and unforgiving, was slowly transforming into a space of hope and connection. One evening, after a long day of work, Elias and Lyra sat together on the edge of the highest dune. The sun was setting, casting long shadows and painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Lyra's eyes reflected the colors, making her appear almost like a living sunset. "You have changed a lot in a short time," she said softly. "The land is alive. The people are alive. Even you are different." Elias laughed quietly. I suppose so. I never imagined this. I thought life on Mars would always be quiet and lonely. Now it feels full. Lyra nodded. It is easy to think life is small, but humans have a gift. You notice, you create, you connect. That is rare in the universe. He looked out across the fields, seeing the soft glow of the plants in the evening light. I never knew I could do this, he admitted. I never knew we could make Mars feel alive. You did not know because you had no one to guide you, Lyra replied. But guidance is only part of the story. You and your neighbors are learning, you are listening. That is what matters. The wind carried her words across the dunes. Elias felt a deep sense of gratitude. Lyra had entered his life as a stranger, a being from another world, and yet she had changed everything. He realized that learning and caring could be an adventure as vast as the stars themselves. The following days were filled with experiments. Lyra introduced methods for enhancing plant growth without machines, showing them how subtle movements of air and water could make a difference. She demonstrated techniques for observing the land, for understanding its moods and rhythms. Elias and the others worked tirelessly, learning to interpret subtle signs, the tilt of a leaf, the moisture in the soil, the faint patterns in the rocks. Every day brought new discoveries. Visitors brought tools and ideas of their own. One man suggested creating small wind channels to direct breezes over the crops. A woman experimented with reflective panels to distribute sunlight more evenly. Elias coordinated the efforts, ensuring Lyra could guide them safely. Slowly, the community developed a rhythm, a pattern of cooperation and creativity that brought them together in ways they had never imagined. Lyra watched with quiet satisfaction. She had wandered countless worlds, seen civilizations rise and fall, and yet she found joy in this small Martian community. They were learning not just to survive, but to thrive. They were discovering the power of curiosity, patience, and connection. One night, as the stars filled the sky, Elias approached Lyra with a new idea. What if we could share this beyond the ranch? There are others on Mars, lonely places, struggling with the soil, the water. What if we could teach them what you've taught us? Lyra considered, her silver hair catching the starlight. It is possible, she said, but it must be done carefully. Sharing knowledge is different from sharing presence. You must be patient, gentle, and respectful. Then it will work. Elias nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. I understand. We will start small and grow from there. The next morning, they began planning. They created small demonstration gardens and used holographic projections to teach techniques without Lyra needing to move to every location. Elias coordinated the flow of visitors, ensuring that everyone learned at a safe distance while still feeling connected to the giant. Children, adults, and even distant travelers took part, experimenting with ideas, asking questions, and marveling at the results. By the end of the week, the ranch had transformed even further. The soil was rich and dark, the crops were taller and healthier, and the community had learned to observe, listen, and care. Lyra smiled as she watched the visitors leave, knowing that the seeds of knowledge and connection had taken root. Elias felt a quiet pride. He had started as a lonely rancher, struggling to survive in a harsh world. Now he was a teacher, a guide, and part of a community that had learned to see the unseen, to care for the small, and to grow together. Lyra had returned his life to him, not by staying permanently, but by inspiring him to look beyond himself. As the sun set over the dunes once more, Lyra turned to Elias. You are ready for the next step, she said. Sharing is not only about knowledge. It is about friendship, connection, and trust. Remember that. Elias nodded. He knew that this was just the beginning. The Martian desert, once a lonely expanse, was now alive with potential. And with Lyra's guidance, the future was brighter than he had ever imagined. The sun rose slowly over the Martian plains, spilling gold across the red dunes. Elias walked among the crops, checking the delicate rows of vegetables and herbs that now thrived under Lyra's guidance. He marveled at how far the land had come in just a few weeks. What was once a barren stretch of sand now hummed with life, each plant a testament to care, patience, and the invisible guidance of a gentle giant from another world. Lyra had arrived before sunrise, towering above the fields but moving with the same quiet grace she always had. Her presence, once startling, had become comforting. The workers, visitors, and neighbors who had come to help now moved around her without fear, guided by respect and curiosity. They had begun calling her the guardian of the oasis, though she only smiled and reminded them, I am a traveler, not a ruler. I am here to teach, to guide, not to command. Today was different. Today, Elias had planned something special. After discussions with Lyra and the visiting neighbors, he had decided to hold a small festival, a gathering where the people of Mars could come together to experience her knowledge, celebrate the growth of the land, and learn through play, observation, and experimentation. It was an idea that made him nervous, but he could see Lyra's approval in her calm, silver eyes. By mid-morning, the first visitors arrived. Families, traders, scientists, and curious travelers from distant settlements stepped onto the ranch, marveling at the transformation of the land. Small children ran ahead, pointing to the giant and laughing. The adults whispered in awe as they adjusted to the presence of Lyra, careful not to intrude but eager to witness her magic. Elias had prepared simple but effective demonstrations. Floating platforms, controlled by drones, displayed holographic information about plant growth, soil patterns, and irrigation. Lyra guided visitors through the systems, showing them how small changes could create big results. A child pressed a button on one platform, and a patch of soil below glowed faintly as water and nutrients moved precisely to the roots of the crops. The crowd gasped, and Elias laughed softly, sharing a proud glance with Lyra. "You have brought them together," Lyra said, her voice soft yet carrying across the open space. "This is more than a festival. This is learning, sharing, and connection." Elias nodded. "That's the goal. Everyone can see and try. No one will feel left out. You've taught me that sharing knowledge is just as important as learning it." The festival unfolded like a carefully composed symphony. Children experimented with reflective panels, adjusting angles to catch sunlight and redirect it toward plants. Adults studied soil samples under small microscopes, comparing textures and moisture levels. Traders offered seeds and tools they had brought from distant Martian settlements. Lyra moved among them, guiding, correcting, and inspiring, never taking over but always present. One man approached Elias, a newcomer from a settlement beyond the dunes. "I've never seen anything like this," he said. "The way she moves, the way she teaches, it's remarkable. And the plants, they respond so quickly. Is this really possible?" Elias smiled. "Yes, it is. Lyra has taught us to listen, to care, and to notice what we often miss. That's all it takes." As the day went on, laughter and conversation filled the air. Children shared stories of the plants they had helped grow. Adults discussed ideas for future gardens and water systems. Even those who had been skeptical of Lyra's presence found themselves captivated by her gentle teaching. The festival was not just an event. It was a moment of transformation, a turning point for the community. Lyra paused near a small patch of sprouts and watched the visitors with quiet satisfaction. "They are learning more than you realize," she said to Elias. "Not just about the land, but about themselves, about connection, patience, and care. These are skills that will last far beyond this festival." Elias nodded, feeling a deep warmth in his chest. He realized that her presence had given him and the community a gift that went beyond plants and soil. It was the gift of perspective, of seeing the world as alive and full of possibility. As the sun reached its highest point, Elias decided to introduce a new activity, a storytelling circle. Visitors gathered around a large, flat rock that served as a stage, while Lyra sat nearby, towering but gentle. One by one, people shared stories about their lives on Mars, the challenges they faced, and the dreams they held. Lyra listened, her silver hair shimmering in the sunlight, occasionally nodding or offering quiet encouragement. A young woman spoke of her family farm, struggling to grow crops in the harsh Martian climate. "I never thought we could improve so much," she said. "But seeing what we learned here and what Lyra has taught, I feel hopeful for the first time in years." Lyra smiled. "Hope is a seed like any other. Water it with care and it will grow." Elias felt tears prick his eyes. The festival was everything he had hoped for and more. It was not just a display of knowledge or skill. It was a celebration of connection. Humans, he realized, were capable of extraordinary things when they worked together, when they listened, learned, and cared. Lyra had reminded them of that truth in the most unexpected way. As afternoon approached, Elias noticed a group of children trying to recreate one of Lyra's demonstrations. They had rigged a series of small mirrors to catch sunlight and redirect it onto tiny seedlings. The effect was subtle but visible. The plants tilted slightly, as if reaching for the light more eagerly than before. Lyra crouched beside them, guiding their hands and explaining the principles behind her actions. One child asked, "Can we do this at home?" Lyra smiled. "Yes. You can carry this knowledge wherever you go. You do not need me to guide you every time. The land will respond if you pay attention and care." The children beamed, and Elias watched as their parents nodded with quiet pride. He realized that the festival had done more than share Lyra's knowledge. It had sparked curiosity, creativity, and a sense of responsibility in the next generation. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the dunes, Elias gathered the visitors for a closing activity. He handed each person a small packet of seeds, encouraging them to plant them wherever they could, to observe, learn, and share the results with others. "These seeds are more than plants," he said. "They are knowledge, hope, and connection. Share them wisely, and they will grow far beyond this place." Lyra watched silently, her eyes reflecting the warm colors of the sunset. "You have done well," she said to Elias. "The festival is not just an event, it is a symbol. It shows that humans can share, learn, and grow together. This is what makes life strong, even in the most challenging places." Elias felt a quiet satisfaction. The festival had been a success, not because of the technology or even Lyra's guidance alone, but because of the people, their willingness to listen, learn, and connect. He realized that this was only the beginning. With patience, care, and cooperation, the community could achieve far more than he had ever imagined. As night fell, the festival grounds were quiet, lit only by small lanterns Elias had set up to guide the visitors safely back to their camps. The plants glowed faintly under the Martian stars, a gentle reminder of the day's success. Lyra stood on a small hill, gazing at the fields with quiet satisfaction. Elias joined her, feeling the cool night wind brush across his face. "You are proud," she said softly, her voice carrying across the dunes. "I am," Elias admitted. "Not just of the ranch or the crops, but of the people. They are amazing, and you helped them see that." Lyra nodded. "I did not do it alone. You guided them, you opened the way, and you cared. That is what makes the difference." Elias realized the truth in her words. Lyra had been a guide, but it was he who had nurtured the community, encouraged participation, and allowed the knowledge to spread. And in doing so, he had discovered something profound. Humans, working together and guided by curiosity and care, could achieve wonders even in the most unexpected places. As they watched the stars appear one by one, Elias felt a deep sense of connection, not just to Lyra or the visitors, but to the land, the plants, and the possibilities that lay ahead. The festival had been a moment of transformation, a reminder that life could be nurtured, shared, and celebrated. And it had also been a lesson. True growth, whether in plants or people, required patience, attention, and a willingness to learn. Lyra lowered herself slightly, sitting beside Elias. "You have learned well," she said. "But remember, this is only the beginning. Sharing knowledge, sharing care, and sharing hope, that is the journey. The future will be bright if you continue." Elias nodded, feeling the weight and promise of her words. He knew that the journey ahead would not always be easy, but it would be full of wonder, discovery, and connection. And for the first time, he understood that the lonely rancher he once had been was gone. In his place stood someone ready to learn, teach, and share, guided by the wisdom of a giant who had wandered worlds to remind humans of their own potential. As the wind swept across the Martian dunes and the stars sparkled above, Elias and Lyra sat quietly, sharing the stillness, the memories of the day, and the hope for tomorrow. And somewhere in the distance, the red plains seemed to whisper in agreement, alive with possibility, ready for the next chapter of growth, learning, and shared adventure. The next morning, Elias woke to a soft breeze brushing across the Martian plains. The ranch was quiet, the festival long gone, but the energy it had left behind lingered like a warm glow. He walked among the crops, noticing the subtle shifts in the plants. They had grown stronger, more vibrant, as if absorbing the hope and knowledge shared during the festival. The Martian soil, once barren and stubborn, now seemed alive, filled with the promise of life. Lyra had returned before sunrise, her enormous form silhouetted against the rising sun. She moved slowly across the fields, careful not to crush the delicate plants beneath her feet. Elias watched, feeling a sense of awe he had not yet grown accustomed to. There was something timeless about her presence, as if she carried centuries of knowledge and memories in her every movement. "You are early," Elias said softly, smiling as he approached her. I wanted to see the land at first light, Lyra replied. There is clarity in the morning, even the plants are different when the sun is new. Elias nodded. He understood. It was more than just observation. It was about noticing the small changes that others might miss, the quiet growth that signaled life was responding to care. Together, they walked the rows of crops, examining leaves, soil, and water channels. You have done well, Lyra said after a while. The community continues to learn. They remember what they practiced during the festival. Their care is spreading. Elias felt a swell of pride. He thought about the neighbors who had come, the children whose curiosity had been sparked, the adults who had laughed and experimented alongside them. It was more than he had imagined when Lyra first appeared at the edge of the dunes. The desert, once empty and silent, was now alive with learning, connection, and hope. I think we can take it further, Elias said. We can teach others beyond this area. Other settlements could benefit. Maybe even people who never leave their homes will be able to participate. Lyra's eyes sparkled. It is possible. You have the ability to guide them to share knowledge safely. Humans are capable of understanding far more than they believe. Sometimes they only need a gentle push. Elias spent the day planning. Using drones, holographic displays, and portable demonstration kits, he and Lyra devised a system to share the methods of care and observation they had developed. Visitors could connect from afar, interact with the crops, and even observe Lyra's guidance without leaving their settlements. It was a way to spread knowledge without overwhelming her, ensuring that her presence remained gentle and safe for everyone. By late afternoon, the first remote participants joined. Through screens and drones, children and adults alike manipulated soil, water, and sunlight, guided by instructions from Lyra and the local team. Elias watched as their eyes widened in amazement when plants shifted slightly in response to careful adjustments. Laughter and excitement filled the air, even through the digital connection. The sense of wonder was universal, and Elias realized that they were creating something bigger than a ranch, bigger than a festival. They were building a network of learning, curiosity, and shared care. As the day wore on, a group of neighbors approached Elias and Lyra with an idea. "We want to help," one of them said. "We could organize similar gatherings in our settlements, teaching what we learned here. You've inspired us, and we want to share it further." Lyra smiled. "Then do it, but remember, patience is key. Teach gently, listen to the land, let it respond in its own time, do not rush." Elias nodded. "We will. You've taught us more than techniques. You've taught us how to think, how to observe, how to connect. That is what we will carry forward." The sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the Martian sky in soft shades of pink and orange. Lyra moved to the highest dune, gazing across the fields and the glowing plants. Elias joined her, the wind brushing against his face and carrying the faint scent of minerals and water from the thriving soil. "You have changed," Lyra said quietly. "Not just the land, but yourself. You were lonely before, hesitant, unsure. Now you guide, teach, and care." "That is strength," Elias smiled, feeling warmth in his chest. "I never imagined I could do all this. I thought the desert would always be empty and quiet, but now it feels alive, full of possibilities." Lyra nodded. "Life is full of possibilities. You only need to see them." They watched the sun disappear behind the distant dunes, the sky darkening as the stars began to appear. The Martian night was calm, filled with the quiet hum of life, plants, soil, and the small movements of drones carrying water and nutrients. It was a different kind of music, one of growth and care, subtle but powerful. "I will travel again soon," Lyra said softly. "I cannot stay forever. My journey continues, but I will return, and when I do, I hope to see even more growth, more learning, more connection." Elias felt a pang of sadness, but also a deep understanding. "I will be here. The ranch, the community, we will be ready. We've learned much from you, and we will continue. You've given us a gift." Lyra lowered herself slightly, bringing her face closer to his. "The gift is not mine alone. It is yours, too. You have chosen to care, to guide, to listen. That is why the land responds, why the people respond, why hope grows." Elias nodded, understanding fully now. Lyra had not just taught them techniques. She had taught them perspective, patience, and connection. The knowledge was theirs to carry forward, to share, and to grow. Over the next few weeks, Lyra guided the community in creating small satellite gardens in nearby settlements. Using holographic links, drones, and carefully coordinated instruction, she and Elias helped spread the lessons of observation, care, and patience. Children planted seeds in faraway colonies, adjusting water and light based on what they learned at the ranch. Adults monitored growth, shared results, and offered encouragement to one another. Elias marveled at the spread of knowledge. The Martian desert, once a place of isolation, was now filled with networks of care, learning, and hope. He realized that Lyra's gift was not her presence alone, but her ability to awaken the best in humans, to make them see their own potential, creativity, and capacity for connection. One evening, after a long day of teaching and observation, Elias sat with Lyra at the edge of the fields. The stars were bright, scattered across the Martian sky like glittering jewels. The wind whispered across the dunes, carrying the soft rustle of leaves and the faint hum of drones tending the crops. "You have done well," Lyra said. "This is more than a ranch, it is a symbol. A symbol that humans can care, can learn, and can connect, even in the most challenging environments." Elias smiled. "I never thought I could make such a difference. I thought I was just a lonely rancher, but now I see what is possible." Lyra nodded. "Loneliness teaches, but connection transforms. You have transformed not only your life, but the lives of many. That is strength beyond size, beyond knowledge." He watched her gaze drift toward the horizon. "Will you come back soon?" he asked. "I will," she said. "But perhaps not immediately. The journey continues. My travels teach me as much as they teach others. But I leave you with this. Continue to share, continue to care, continue to observe. That is the path forward." Elias felt a deep sense of peace. He realized that Lyra's presence had not just improved his ranch or the soil. It had transformed him, the community, and even the very desert itself. The barren land was now alive, and so were the hearts and minds of the people who lived there. The weeks turned into months, and Elias continued his work. The crops thrived, the community grew, and new settlements adopted the lessons learned from the ranch. Children told stories of the gentle giant, of her silver hair and kind eyes, and how she had taught them to see life in new ways. Adults shared knowledge, experimented with new techniques, and nurtured their land with patience and care. Elias often thought of Lyra, imagining her wandering across the Martian plains or visiting distant worlds. He knew she carried memories of their shared time with her, just as he carried memories of her guidance, stories, and laughter. Though she traveled far, her influence remained. One evening, as he walked among the glowing fields, Elias whispered to the wind, "Share me with your friends, Lyra. I understand now. I will share what you taught me, and the world will grow because of it." And somewhere far across the Martian desert, the wind carried the whisper back, soft and gentle. A reminder that connection, curiosity, and care could travel farther than even a wandering giant. Elias smiled, feeling the warmth of hope, the strength of community, and the quiet certainty that life, human and otherwise, was meant to be shared. The Martian desert, once lonely and silent, had become alive with possibility, laughter, and care. And in the heart of it all stood a rancher who had learned that even the smallest acts of attention could ripple outward, changing the world in ways he had never imagined. Lyra had come and gone, but the story they had written together, of learning, sharing, and connection, would last forever.